This is an overview of the Hebrew alphabet. The Hebrew alphabet consists of 22 or 23 consonants, depending on how you number them, and there are no actual vowel letters. There are vowel pointings that we can look at in a future lesson. The Hebrew alphabet is read from right to left, and so you'll start here and go this direction, and then you go down to the next line and you'll read again from right to left. And so we will begin with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet now, which is Aleph. Aleph is a silent letter. The closest thing to a pronunciation you might do with an Aleph is to come to maybe a full stop if it's in the middle of a word, a quick but full stop, or maybe a sound similar to the H in honest at the beginning of the word if it begins a word. That's Aleph. Second is Beit. Beit, you'll notice, has two different pronunciations here. It depends on whether it has a dot in the middle. There's a name for the dot and a function for that we can look at in a future lesson. But for now, just know if you see the dot, pronounce it as a B, as in bat. Or if you see it without the dot, pronounce it like a V, as in van. That's Beit. Next is Gimel. Gimel, well, with a dot or without, is pronounced the same way in modern Hebrew. It is G as in game, the hard G, game. Next we have Dalet. Dalet, you see, also has a form with a dot that is pronounced the same in the case of this letter, and it's D as in door, Dalet. Hey is pronounced like our H, H as in hug, hey. Vav is pronounced as V in van in modern Hebrew, but in classical Hebrew it's thought that it was pronounced like a W sound and that it was actually sort of a placeholder, sort of an indicator of a vowel, almost like the W at the end of wow, and that sort of a sound, and the letter being pronounced like wow and a W sound historically. But modern Hebrew uses the V sound, and that's what I will use, as that's more like you will hear it read today. Even modern people reading the classical biblical Hebrew, they'll pronounce it with the modern pronunciation. So that's what we'll use here with the V sound for Vav. Next we have Zion. Zion is similar to our Z sound, Z as in zebra, Zion. Het, you have sort of a guttural sound to it like Bach, and so a little sound there in the back of your throat, Het. Then there's Tet, which we pronounce like the T in ton, Tet. Yod, and we'll use that like our Y letter, and Y in yell. If we are using it as a consonant, the word we'll find later can function with a vowel pointer to be like the end of a word like toy, that sort of sound. But if you see it used as a consonant, as it often is, Y like in yell. Kaf, you see three forms here. The one with the dot, which we pronounce with the hard K sort of sound like in can. Without the dot, the sound, the guttural type sound like Bach. You can also see Kaf written as a final form, and you'll see the other dots there with it. That's called a schwa, and we'll deal with that in a future lesson, hopefully. But that's what it looks like if it's at the very end of the word. If it's in the middle of the word, it looks like one of the first two. That's Kaf. Then we have Lamed, like our L in leg, Lamed. Mem, like our letter M, and it has a final form, and that's what it looks like at the very end of the word, the one on the left. The one that with the open portion is what it looks like in the middle of the word, the closed portion at the end. Mem, like in the M in memory. Then we have Nun, like our letter N, and we can say the word noon, and that's the pronunciation as well, but it's like that letter. It has a final form. It's elongated all the way down in the final form and extends below the line, whereas the rest of the time it looks like the one just underneath the name and above the pronunciation, Noon. Then we have Samik, which is pronounced like an S sound, S as in safe, Samik. Ayin is a guttural letter historically, but it's not something that has its own pronunciation. It's typically treated as a silent letter. Ayin, although some have likened it to the sound that you make in the back of your throat, like when the doctor is telling you to say ah, that sort of sound. but it's normally considered a silent letter, a silent consonant in Hebrew. Then we have pei. Pei has three forms, as you see here. You've got the dot, which makes it pronounced with a hard P, like in pig. And then if it doesn't have a dot, it's pronounced like our F sound or our PH sound, as in phone. And then it also has a final form that stretches it out and takes that thing that sits on the bottom of the line, makes it go all the way down below it. That's pei. Then we have sadi. Sadi is pronounced really like a TS sound, like cats. Sadi is a letter that also has a final form, as you can see there on the left. Then we have the letter kof, which is similar to our K sound. Our K is in kite, kof. Resh, similar to our R sound, as in run. It's maybe a little more of a guttural beginning to it, but it's the closest thing is our R. That's all we need to know for now. Resh is like R in run. Then we have two letters that are going to look very similar. The first is sin, and it's pronounced with an S sound, like in sin. And I put that there intentionally too, because it looks like that. It's not the same as the English word sin, but it's the Hebrew letter sin, pronounced like that S sound, though, in the word sin. Then you've got sheen. Now these look identical except for the dot over the top. Sin has the dot on the left, sheen has it on the right, and sheen is pronounced like the SH sound, like in shin. So sin and sin and sheen and shin, the SH sound for the sheen letter. And that's why I said at the beginning there are 22 or 23 letters. Some count this as the same letter. You can see how that's done in the Hebrew Bible or in the English Bible even, with Psalm 119 and how the letters are laid out there. And then tav. Tav has two forms. The dot historically may have caused it to be pronounced differently. Without the dot, it may have been a TH, but in modern Hebrew, they say both with the T sound, like in tame. Tav. T as in tame. Now that completes the Hebrew alphabet, and I've got a little song that helps learn it, because that's how we all learned our English alphabet. And this one I call the Hebrew Aleph Beit. It's to the tune of Mama's Little Baby Loves Shortening Bread. Very versatile tune you can use for other alphabets as well. But I'm going to sing it with the letters highlighted and then sing it without them highlighted. And I would encourage you to learn this by heart. Aleph Beit Gimel Dalet Hey Vav Zayin Het Tet Yod Kaf Lamed Mem Nun Samek Ayin Pei Tzadi Kof Resh Sin Shin Tav. That's the Hebrew Aleph Beit. Aleph Beit Gimel Dalet Hey Vav Zayin Het Tet Yod Kaf Lamed Mem Nun Samek Ayin Pei Tzadi Kof Resh Sin Shin Tav. That's the Hebrew Aleph Beit. We'll look more closely at this in a future session, hopefully. Gutturals, the Aleph, Hey, Het, Ayin, and Resh are all letters that are special, that will play into certain rules later. We saw the letters with the dots earlier. You can remember them by this little acronym, this Begad Kafat letters. And when you memorize that, you'll be able to remember that these letters will take this dot, which is called a Dagesh Lene, and the Dagesh Lene changes the pronunciation of some of these letters, namely the Beit, the B or V sound, depending on whether you have the dot or not, and the Pei, the P or PH sound, depending on whether you have the dot, and then the Kaf with the K, C sound, like more like the K, or the K, like Bach sound. We saw final forms in some of the letters as well, with the very last letter looking like a different form. It's as compared to where it appears in the middle or the beginning of a word. There are also some words that have lookalikes, or letters that have lookalikes, and you'll want to be aware of those as well, especially practicing your writing so you don't get your own handwriting mixed up. It's a little easier to see with the serifs and the pre-made fonts. I would encourage you to take a look in your English Bible at Psalm 119. Most English Bibles will have printed either the Hebrew letter or a transliteration of it. Lamentations 3 is also a place you might see that. In Psalm 119, it's 22 sections, 8 verses, each begin with the same letter. So Aleph, 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 and so on. In the first 8, Beit, 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 and the second 8, and so forth. Lamentations has 3 verses with Aleph, 3 with Beit, 3 with Gimel, and so on. The alphabet and consonants, it'd be good to practice them by looking at those Old Testament passages, singing, writing, memorizing the Begad Kafat letters, the sounds, and what they are for each one, and which ones change, identifying the name of that dot, the Dageshleni, the guttural letters, which ones they are, the 5 final forms, and then be able to distinguish those look-alike letters.